Page 55, Daf Nun Hey, Tractate Eiruvin. Just introduction. What we finish our when we discussed yesterday, the idea of study Torah and repeating the study many times. So here we talk about special effort, ma'amatz balimud, special effort in the study. V'hainu damar avdi mi bar chama bar dosa, at the top of page 55. Mai dechtiv lo b'shamayim hi, the Torah said in Dvarim, in Deuteronomy chapter 30, ki ha-mitzvah azot, meaning the Torah, lo b'shamayim hi leimor mi'alenu alenu ha-shamayim v'yikacher lanu, it's not in heaven, meaning it's not something that is beyond your reach, and it's not overseas, which is something that Hashem give us, but it's in our ability. Meaning, when we study Torah on daily basis or fulfilling mitzvot, it's something that it's not beyond our ability. לא בשמיים, שאם בשמיים אתה צריך לעלות אחריה. If it's in the heaven, meaning you need to go up to reach it. ואם מעבר לימי, אתה צריך לעבור אחריה. If it's overseas, you need to cross the ocean to get it. Which means that it's in our ability. We can reach it in our hands, in our mind. And this is a very important rule I want all of you guys to understand. Hashem never give us anything that is beyond our ability. Because otherwise it's really in heaven or across the ocean. It is something that we can reach. So because of that, we need to make all of our effort to circumvent the other side. You call it Satan, you call it evil inclination, you call it all kind of other needs. We need to understand, Rashi said, that we can make a mnemonic in the Torah in order to remember, we can repeat it, we dedicate a time, but also we need to involve in our own traits, to train ourselves to do as follows. Rava amar lo b'shamayim lo timatze b'mi shemagbiya da'ato alea. Rava said that it's not in heaven means that the Torah is not be found as someone who raises his mind over it, which means that he is a arrogant or haughtiness, Maharsha said. How it expresses? Someone said, I don't need a rabbi, I don't need a teacher to teach me. I can learn everything myself. I'm smart enough to know and understand everything myself. ולא תימצא במי שמרחיב דעתו עליה קיים. And it's also not applied to someone that he is that he feels, I heard it one time, so I don't need to bother repeat it more. I just heard it once, it's fine. The Maharsha said that's not good. Furthermore, Rabbi Yochanan amar lo b'shamayim lo timatze begasei haruach. Rabbi Yochanan said it's not in heaven, meaning it's not the people who are arrogant or carry haughtiness, and ולא תימצא במי שמרחיב דעתו עליה קיים. רבי יוחנן ולא מעבר לימי, לא תימצא בסרחנים ולא בתגרים. So he said that the Torah will not be found among the merchants or traders, which means these people all the time are traveling from one location to another. So therefore, they are busy making money, they're busy in their business, etc. So it's always this dilemma. A person can make a living and study Torah by the same time, but for those who want to accumulate the wealth and by the same token to accumulate the wealth of Torah, many times it's a conflict. According to this opinion, it doesn't go together. You cannot do it both. You have to pick and choose in your priority what is more important. And therefore, if you not going around so much and traveling and making big businesses and making fun and spending time with friends and all of this, but you're focusing more on study Torah, that's something that you can internalize and carry it, not just for yourself, but also for the future. With that in mind, we go to the discussion that we have at the beginning of this chapter. If you remember, we said that the border of the city can be extended much more than they are. So we said that when we measure the city, there are sometimes have a different measurement because some of the cities have some extensions in different locations. Tanu Rabbanan, Keitzad me'abrin et ha'arim. How does one extend the boundary limits of the city? So, in order to understand that, we need to use some of the Me'orot picture. Let's start with picture number 192. Aruka kemot shehi. If it's made in aruka, which means it's like like malben, like city long in shape of rectangle, the Shabbat limit is measured in the boundary as it is, which means you don't change it. Soon the Gemara explain why. Agula osim la zaviyot. If it's agula, meaning it's around, so what do? You start with the around, and then you make the zaviyot, the corner. So let's think together. What comes first? So Rashi said, כשבא למדוד תחומים לקצותיה, לא ימדוד לה מהחומה, אלא יוסיף לה ריבוע. So when you have to measure, you don't go by the border, but you add this ribua, which means, what do you gain? You tell me, you guys tell me, what happened here? When you circle around the city, that's the first stage. And then you add this ribua, you gain what?
More
the corners. Right?
Okay.
So you have the 2,000 cubit from each side. And Rashi said here, Klomar, I explained it in my book, Biurei Klomar Berashi al Hashas, that he said, Klomar yarchik min hachoma kedei ribua. So, in general, Rashi meant to say that osim la zaviyot, that you change this, the corner of the city. And Rashi said, no, it's not real making those corners, but the idea is that you make it, you measure it from the end of these houses in each part. Yet, as far as the whole city measurement, you go also and you add those corners. But the measurement starts from the last house of each side of this around. And I think that that's the reason why he used here the word klomar. Now, so merubat. If the city, let's go to the next picture. Merubat en osin la zaviyot. So if it's a square, you don't add more corners because it's square. So from there we'll learn that there is a pe'ah, that is the corner on each side. הייתה רחבה מצד אחד וקצרה מצד אחר, רואים אותה כאילו היא שווה. if the city, as you know, when you take a air picture, meaning you take a picture like you have in those sites, you have it in the Zoosk, you have in Google, you have in many sites the blueprint of the picture from above, from the air. So if you measure the city, picture 193, you see that one side is longer and length than the other side. Did you notice that? Everyone notice that?
Yeah.
So you see here, this is long, this is short, and look what happened both sides. So how you measure the 2000? So they said you put a imaginary line in this part, and as a result you're measuring from here at the midst of the city, but not from here. Okay?
Yes.
So Rashi said that's basically change, hofech the ir malbenit, that it makes the city looks like almost like a square city, right? But it's not a the whole idea is that they hold that Tchumin de Rabbanan, the Shabbat limit is rabbinic. So the first you make the corners, the zaviyot, and then you make the 2000 amah. Next one, היה בית אחד יוצא כמין פגום, או שני בתים חוט מתוח, או שני בתים יוצאים כמין שני פיגומים, רואים אותם כאילו חוט מתוח עליהן ומודד ממנו ולהלן 2000 אמה. So imagine if there is a houses, you see it in the Rashi here, the pictures, that you have several houses that come in each side of the city. So you treat it like a little tower, and it's like a string at the top of that. Haya asuya kemin keshet, picture number 194. If the city is made like rainbow, so how you treat it? They have this spot in between that it's empty. Correct?
Yes.
So, or kemin gam, so basically you put a line here, and you treat it here, from here 2000 amah. In that sense, you hold that that this part is fully occupied. And then, או כמין גאם, רואים אותה כאילו היא מלאה בתים. So, גאם, it's like, you see what happened here? It's like reish, opposite reish, the Hebrew letter reish. You see here, this part is empty. But again, you take the imaginary of lining here and here, and you're measuring 2000 amah from this corner. רואים אותה כאילו היא מלאה בתים וחצרות, ומודד ממנו להלן 2000 אמה. You imagine that it's filled of houses and yards, and you measure from that spot 2000 cubit. Any question?
No.
What I'm sharing with you is the point of Rashi, Rashba, Ritva, etc. Now we elaborate on that. המרמר ארוכה כמות שהיא. Picture number 196. Mar said, if it's made like Malben, you see what happened here? That this length is much longer than this one. Okay? So, how you measure it? So he said, you don't add immediately, but he measured 2000 amah. Okay? Not like round, but here that first he measured it. So they said pshita. You don't think that you make it short, so why we need to tell us? Lo tzricha de aricha uktina. because one part is long and the other part is narrow, it's short. Ma'u detema liten la putya aorka. So maybe you have to make it decide that it will be totally square. Kamash melan. So they have to tell us that that you don't change the borders of the CD, because you add only corners to make it square. Like for example, if it's round, you make those corners to make it square. But this one have already corners. You see, Malben, they have those corners. So because it's already existed, you don't add to make it equal. Merubat en osim la zaviyot. But if the city is square, okay, so you measure the 2000 amma from here. You don't make the corner if it's you don't create additional corners for it. So the Gemara said pshita, that's obvious. Think about it. This is west, east, south, north, and you measure 2000 amma from here. So the lo tzricha de merabba velo berabba beribu haolam, which means it's corner, but not the way that the world created. In other words, it's not the south and the west turn around, different location. You may need to go, which means like everybody, like all the world, the corners of whole world. Kamash melan, you don't do that, which means Rashi said, because they have corners, you leave it as is, you don't change it. Haya bait echad yotze kemin pagum. If one house in the row dwellings was protruding like a turret, which means you have one house that extended the border, or shnei batim yotzim kemin shnei pigumim, or if two houses were protruding like two turtles, which means that it's changed the whole status. It says hashta by the chadamar shte batim ibaya. If one house you said to extend the city boundaries, so you necessarily need to say for the two. Lo tzricha mishtei ruchot, which means that Rashi said one house come out in the north, another house in the south. So mao the tema meruach echad amrinan mishtei ruchot lo amrinan. So you may say that if when a house protrudes from one side, we say that the city is extended even due to a single house. But if the houses protrude from two sides, we do not say so. So Kamash Melan teach us that regard to the city, it's extended in both sides. הייתה עשויה כמין קשת, או כמין גם, רואים אותה כאילו היא מלאה בתים וחצרות ומודד ממנה לעולם 2000 אמה. We explained earlier, if the city was made like a rainbow, or it was like reish, like cuffs of feet, like. So you imagine that it's filled of houses. So now Amar Avuna, picture number 198. Ira asuya kekeshet. If the city that made in this way, like a rainbow. Everyone see it?
Yes.
אם יש בין שני ראשיה פחות מ-4,000 אמה, you measure from this corner to this corner, and if it's less than 4,000 cubits, מודדין לה מן היתר, which means you measure from, so you imagine that all these property is filled up with houses and courtyards. So the Gemara asks, ואמר רב הונא חומת העיר שנפרצה ב-141 So picture number 199. Rav Huna said, if you have, this is the city, you take a picture of the city, and you see what happened to the wall. They have a breach in the whole wall that reach a point of 141 and 1/3. So the measurement that it's still considering as one city. Many times you see here small towns, small cities. At the middle of the city is some very short, very small empty spot, and all of a sudden there's a new town. So here they hold that if it's up to a side of this measurement, which is 141 and 1/3, so you treated if someone, for example, Reuven, is staying in this location and he wants to go this location on Shabbat, so it's not considering that he moved from one location to another, because it's all considering one city. So, but if it's exceeded more than that measurement, 141 and 1/3, so it's already considering as what? It's a two separate cities, and therefore he has only 2,000 cubits from the place that he dwelled beginning. So what you see here, that in order to measure the differentiation between the two property of the city, that you make it as a separate town, it's only if it's exceeded more than 141 and 1/3. But what we said earlier, we said that if the city that he made like a keshet, right, that the measurement is what? 4,000 cubits. So you see here that it's a contradictions. It's the opposite. Remember that over there it's connected to each other. Here it's totally separate, the Ritva said. So אמר רבא בר אולה לא קשיא, כאן ברוח אחת, כאן משתי רוחות. Here in this situation of the keshet, so it's attached. Only here there's a spot that it's empty, but kan, in this that it's separate, it's in both sides, so it's a totally detachment between the two properties. So if it's exceeded more than 141 and 1/3, it's already separated two different cities or towns. So Maika Mashmelan. So they ask a question, if that's the case, what's the big chidush Rav Huna wants to tell us? It's obvious if it's a separate and it's a large detachment between the two, you consider them as two cities. So he said, "Denotnin karpaf lezo vekarpaf lezo." That if there is in the two cities, you put 70 and 70 in each part, and with the 70 and 2/3 and 70 with 2/3 together, and then you have 141 and 1/3, and then you put them together and make them one city. So again, imagine you have these two. You take 70 and 2/3 from here, which is half of the side, and you have 70 and 2/3 from here. You match them together, it's what? 141 and 1/3, and now you have as one city. That's the way, by the way, the Rashash explained. So they ask a question, if that's the chidush, is that what Rav Huna tried to tell us? Veha amara Rav Huna chada zimna. Rav Huna already said it, because, and that's a Mishnah we're going to study in Mitzvah Hashem on page 57a, Ditnan. We just turned the page 55b, Notnim karpaf le'ir divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rashi explained, this is the border of the city. כשבא למדוד התחומים, when he measure the city, מניח לעיר אוויר של 70 אמה ושיריים כשהוא כעיר לבד התחום. So you take from this corner 70, a little more than 70 cubit, which means you add to the boundary of city, and the Shabbat limits its measure from here. So in other words, this is the city boundaries. You add 70 and something, 70 cubit and something, and from this point you can count the 2000 cubit. Clear?
Yeah.
V'chachamim omrim. The next picture is from the Me'orot Hadaf, picture 201. V'chachamim omrim, lo amru karpaf ela ben shte ayarot. The whole idea of making karpaf applied to what? Two separate cities, villages, and Rashi said lechabran al yedei karpaf benehem, to match them with this karpaf in between them. That's the only apply here. Ve'itmar, Rav Huna amar, Rav Huna explained that according to the Chachamim, what they meant to say is karpaf lezu vekarpaf lezu, meaning you take two karpafim. Everyone see it?
Yeah.
So you do the same thing, 70 and 2/3, 70 and 2/3 together, it's 141 and 1/3, and then you make it happen. He says no, you make one in between them, and that's it. That it's not exceeded more than 141 and 1/3. So here the question is, if you say it so why we need to tell us that if the city has a breach in between them, it's considering in one city, if it's the detachment. So the Gemara responds and said tzricha. The Rav Huna need to tell us that the measurement is 141 and 1/3 in both cases. The I ashmina nacha. If we talk only in a city that it breach the walls, so we said mishum de havalei tzad heker meikara, because it has an aspect of which means that it's some that we permit from the outset, mainly that you have the two sections originally formed in the city. Avalatam, but over there you talk about two separate towns that they're never attached to each other. A malo, you will say that you make only one karpaf for both of them, otherwise it's not considering as attached to each other. Ve'i ashmu'inanatam, if you talk about two separate cities that they close to each other, which means that Rav Huna said that you need to take two karpifot, mishum dedchika tashmishtayu, because one karpaf will be too cramped for use of both cities. Aval hacha, but here in the city that the wall preached, the lo dechika tashmishayu, that the karpaf will not be too cramped for one use of both sections. A malo, you may say that this is not the case in a single karpaf. It's enough, it's sufficient, and tzricha. So therefore, Rav Huna need to tell us that in each case you put karpaf to each city, and they're considering as one city, at least that the spot between them is 141 and 1/3 cubits. Now we go further. The city that it looks like keshet, v'chamea havei ben yeter lekeshet. You see here, this is the keshet, which means in that sense it's like keshet is a rainbow in Hebrew. It's like a round. So we ask a question: what's the? Here we understand. How about this? This is the most distant house from here, and what's the size in between? Rabba bar Rav Huna amar 2,000 amar, which means if it's exceeded more than 2,000 cubit, we have a problem. But if otherwise, it's fine. Rava brede Rabba bar Rav Huna amar afilu yater me2,000 amar. He said that even it's exceeded more than 2,000 cubit, it's fine. Can you give me an idea why he said that it's fine even it's more than 2,000 cubit? Look how the city looks like, and you tell me what's the reason he said that it's fine? Because if you look at the structure of the city, look what happened. It's basically all connected.
Yeah.
It's no break. And you go the way that he made the city, it's basically this house and this house in a way.
They are in the same corner even almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he holds that even this part is exceeded more than 2,000 cubit, it's fine. Amar Abaye say kvatei de Rava bre de Rabba bar Rav Huna mistabra. That we understand that even that it's exceeded more than 2,000 amah, it's fine. The ibaya hadar at derech batim. Because if he needs to go back here, guess what he can do, this guy? He can go and use the existed houses to go in between. Which means he can go from here to here, he can go this way, and he can come back this way. So therefore, even from here to here, it's more than 2,000 cubit. It doesn't make a difference since this area or this area is fully occupied, and he can use those houses to go from one to another. So since within the domain of the city, it's all considering as one, and if it's considering one, then it's fine. You measure it. So what do you understand with that? There are 2 points we understand. I'm following here the Ritva. He said that if this part, for example, was split, right, then we have the issue. But Tosfot said that again we hold leniency since you can walk either way. The Mishnah Brura in Shin Tzadik Chet explained that this measurement we just talked is very much the same as the Tosfot here, that if it's between the 2,000 cubit to that keshet, to that corner, so it's all considering as it's filled, all this empty spot. Now we turn to the Mishnah. Hayu sham gdudiyot gvohot 10 tfachim. If there is a remnant of wall of 10 handbreadth high, which means from the outskirts of the city. Mike Dudiot, what they are these remnants? אמר רב יהודה 3 מחיצות שאין עליהם תקרה, which means that there are 3 partitions that do not have roof over them. So it's considering as part of the city, despite the fact that they do not comprise a proper house. איבא אלוהו 2 מחיצות ויש עליהם תקרה, מהו? If they have 2 partitions and they have at the top a roof, how you extended the border. So they said, Tashma, אלו שמתעברים עמה, when you extended the border of the city, so you have the city and you have the 70 2/3 cubits. Nefesh is usually the building that you build on the top of a monument for in a cemetery. שיש בה 4 על 4, which means they have 4 cubits, 400 על 400. Usually in those days they use it for the guard of the cemetery. So it's considering like a house, even people not live there. והגשר and a breed, והקבר, קבר meaning the cemetery itself, שיש בהם בית דירה, that they have a house for the guard, ובית הכנסת שיש בה בית דירה לחזן, that the synagogue that has a special room for the cantor or for the attendants. Like you have synagogues that you have a room for the president and room for the shamus and room for the cantor and room for the rabbi, right? So usually synagogue, it's not a place for people to live, but you see even nowadays that there are places that they have the synagogue and the housing in the same location of a person. And להבדיל ובית עבודת כוכבים, a place of idol worshippers, שיש בה בית דירה לכומרים, that they have a house for the clergy, the pastor, והעורבות, the ranch for the horses, והאוצרות, and the place that you put all the grain שבשדות, in the field you put the wine, you put the oil, ויש בהם בית דירה, because they have a lot of treasury, they have a guard that watch over all of that. והבורגנים בתוכה, and all those small huts, small houses in the field, that the guards living there. והבית שבים, if someone live in an island, like you look in Honolulu, or in Hawaii, you see these small tiny islands, and there are some people who live in the empty island. Like who told me that? Someone told me that the owner of one of the airlines, Virgin Airline, he live in one of those empty islands just by himself, large mansion, but by himself in the only his island. He belonged to him, small island. So הרי אלו מתעברים עמה, all the building that we mentioned earlier, they extended in a straight line with the city. ואלו שאין מתעברים עמה, when you do not take those houses that outside of the city domain to incorporate it as the part of the city. So he said, נפש שנפרצה משתי רוחותיה אילך ואילך, if you have a house on the grave that was open in both sides, והגשר והקבר, and the bridge and the graveside at the cemetery, שאין להם בית דירה, that doesn't have a housing, ובית הכנסת שאין לה בית דירה לחזן, if it's a synagogue that doesn't have a house for the attendants, ובית עבודת כוכבים שאין לה בית דירה לכומרים. The same apply to our idol worshippers, that they don't have a house for their clergy. והעורבות, ranches, והאוצרות שבשדות, the treasure in the field, שאין להם בית דירה, that doesn't have a place for people to dwell. ubo, if you have a pit, a go in a corner, vesiach ume'ara, that like a cave. So here we don't speak about the place of dwelling, but it means even a person live there, it's not considering, the Gaon Yaakov said, it's not considering a proper housing. So you cannot extend the city. The city can be extended only if people live in those places. Vegader veshovach shebetocha. It's you have those borders and the place, the nest for the doves, not in the field. V'abayit shebasfina, like you see some people here, they have a boat housing. And elu mitabrin, you're not extended the city for those property. You cannot, in order to make it happen, you need to have part of the city that use for eating, for drinking. The Chazon Ish explained the same apply to a yard that's far from a property. That it's not used for people to dwell there. So if it used in some form of dwelling, that's different. But otherwise, it's detached. קטן מיד, נפש שנפרצה משתי רוחותיה אלך ואלך. If it's a house at the top of the grave that they have, they separate two partitions, and therefore you extended the city for them. He said, my love, the ika tikra. You have to say that you have a four partition that they have at the top of them a roof. So, meaning if it's open only from two partition, that you still have a roof. So he said, lo the leika tikra. You have to say that there is no roof, which means both the partition was broke and also the roof was broken into two pieces. Bayit shebayam lemay chazi. If you talk to me about empty island and you have a house there, so what's the purpose of that house? So the Chazon Ish explained that if one individual living by himself in an empty island, we're not bothered with that. Here we're talking about extension of city for one individual that live in a proximity. But if a person live by himself in an empty island, so what's the point? What's the point to extend it? So he said, Amar Rav Papa bebayit she'asui lefanot bo kelim shebasfina. You have a special housing. Here in our city you see people that having a boat. So the talk here is referring to a house used to move a ship's utensils into storage. You see here, those who are involved with boating know that it's they use it for those utensils. So therefore, Chazon Ish said that you still need to have there a room for housing, because otherwise it's hard to consider as part of the city. So the Gemara asks, "Ume'ara en mitaberet ima?" So you tell me that the cave on the outskirts of the city really not included in its extension? V'atani Rabbi Chia me'ara mitaberet ima. Rabbi Chia said that yes, you can include it in the city. Amar Abaye kesheyesh binyan al pia. When is the structure built on its entrance, which means that it's treated like a house on the outskirts of the city, so then it's different. But cave by itself, it's not considering a dwelling house. So they said, "V'teipu klei mishum binyan gufei." So you may drive the halacha that you treat it because of the structure itself. So why the Tana need to tell that we extended the border of the city because of the cave? לא צריכה להשלים. It's not necessary only to complete the structure when the area of the structure and the cave combined are only for 4 by 4 cubits, which is the minimum size of the house. Amar Rav Huna, Yoshvei Tzrifin, those who dwell in huts, which means that you have those people who live in the, like you see it in Africa, they live in the houses. What?
Hosh.
Hosh, right? Ein modedin lahen ela mipetach bateihen. You measure them on Shabbat limit only from the entrance of the houses, because the hut you cannot combine it and make them as a city. So everyone has his own individual 4 cubits. Mativ Rav Chizda. So we said in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 39, ויחנו על הירדן מבית הישימות עד אבל השיטים. The children of Israel, they are pitched by the Jordan from the Bet Yishimot, is the name of a place, ad אבל השיטים in the plain of Moab. So they said, ואמר רבא בר חנא, אמר רבי יוחנן, לדידי חזלי ההוא אתרא. He said that I saw myself that place, והווה תלת פרסה על תלת פרסה, that it was it's like a 12 meal, that 3 parsa is 4 meals, that it's 8,000 cubits. Vetanya, when they need to use a bathroom, they said כשהם נפנים, הם נפנים לא לפניהם ולא לצדיהם, that they don't use the front of the camp, and the back they use, they respect the respect of the divine presence, they use the side of the cave. No, I'm sorry, not the front, not the side, but beyond the cave. אלא לאחוריהם. So you see here, the situation is that the pillar of cloud, it goes further, it's not coming back. So if someone at the front of the camp need to go at the back, even Shabbat, and it's not considering coming out of the Shabbat limit. Now they live at that time in a temporary places, in a hut, in a tent, right? So you see that it's different than what we just said. It's not just 4 cubits what you said. The entire camp is considering 4 cubits. So it's different than the Rav Huna said. אמר לרבא דגלי מדבר כאמרת? You're going to the banners of the desert, you bring a proof. כיוון דכתיב בו, because they said, the Torah said in Bamidbar, Numbers chapter 9, על פי השם יחנו ועל פי השם ייסעו, according to the word of God, they dwell, they park, and according to the word of God, they move. כמן דקביע לדמי, so it means like they are permanent residents there. It's like they're dwelling permanently there. So even it's a temporary, it's considering as a permanent because they move by the word of Hashem. But a temporary place that people made by people is not considering a city. אמר רב חיננה ברב כהנא אמר רב אשי, אם יש שם 3 חצרות של 2 בתים, if there are 3 courtyards of 2 property built houses among a settlement of huts, so he said hukbeu, they have been established as a permanent settlement, and the Shabbat limit measure from the edge of the settlement. So since we talk about those huts, Amarav, so he said, Amarav Yehuda, Amarav Yoshvei Tzrifin, והולכי מדבריות חייהן אינן חיים, ונשיהם ובניהן אינן שלהם. He says people that travelers, they have those traveling with the livestock, they're looking from one place to another, and people who are constantly moving from a place to another, so they live in a very hard life, and therefore the chances is that their children are not theirs, because they soon we explain. An example, Tanya Nameache, Eliezer איש ביריה אומר, יושבי צריפין כיושבי קברים. People who live in a hut is like people who live in a grave, because anytime there's a strong wind and a heavy rain, and there's a snow, it's a hot sun, so they have all these tremendous nature phenomena that hits them hard, because they don't live in a permanent housing. ועל בנותיהם, הוא אומר, for the daughter they said, and this is an implication from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 27, ארור שוכב עם כל בהמה. Curse be upon those who sleep with any manner of beast. What does that mean? Because, as we said earlier, that they don't have their own children, they do adultery. My Tama, why you think about the daughter that it's not there? He said, Ula amar mishum she'en lahem merchatzarot, because they don't have a permanent housing, so they don't build like used to do in ancient time, a bath houses for public. So people needs to go in order to have to take a shower, to do a bath. They need to go far away, and they leave their wives without anybody. So therefore, they go out with other men, and it's a question if their children are really legitimate. ורבי יוחנן אמר משום שמרגישים זה לזה בתפילה, which means that people who are idolaters knew when the women go to duck themselves in the ritual bed. Now, because it's no place for mikveh for those women, so they need to go a far distance away to purify themselves in a ritual bed. So one woman called their friends, and the neighbor knew about it, and if there's an evil man in between them, he go after them, and they can come to sin. My benayu, what's the difference between these two explanations? Ika benayu, nahara ze samich lebeita. If it's a spring river that close to their houses, so you don't need to go far away, and therefore it's different. You treat it differently. Amar Ravuna, kol ir she'en ba yarak, any city that you don't build a yarak, meaning a vegetation, en talmid chacham rashay ladur ba. A Torah scholar cannot live there. Why? Because vegetables, it's a food that it's good and cheap, and the person can eat them and sustain himself, and he have enough time, Rashi said, to dwell and study Torah. Lemeimra, what do you derive from that? The yarak me'alya, that you tell me that vegetable is a very good, beneficial for a person's health. Ve'atanya, we read something the opposite. Shlosha marbin et hazevel, the three things increase one waste. Vechofefin et hakoma, and bend his stature, which means making bend. V'notlim echad me-500 me'or einav shel adam, and remove 1/500 of the light of person's eye. Ve'elu hen, and these are the least. Pat keivar, we're on page 56a, a coarse bread, made from the coarse flour that not been thoroughly sifted. V'sheichar chadash, in those days they used to make it out of date, but if it's a new beer, ve'yarak, and vegetables. So some say that it's applied to a vegetable that wasn't cooked. Lokashia habektume vekarti ha bishar yarki. So earlier we said it's not healthy, now we see it's healthy. So it said not said it is healthy, now we said it's not. So he said it's not a question. Here we talk about a garlic and leeks, and the other it's talk about other vegetables. Kedetanya, shum yarak, garlic is a healthy vegetable. Kreishin chatzi yarak, leeks are a half vegetable. Nir'et snon, nir'et sam chaim. They said that well, if radish has been seen, it's extension of life, which means that it's good for the body, the radish. V'atanya nir'et snon, nir'et sam hamavet. The other brother said that the radish is it's like a lethal drug. It's not good. So lokashia kan be'alin, kan be'imahot. The other one is talk about the leaf, and the other one is talk about the imahot, which means the root that is good good for food. Kan bimot hachama, kan bimot hagshamim. And Rashi Tosfot explain it's a difference between summer and the winter. So summer, you don't, it's not good to eat the root of the radish because it's create a reaction of the body. But in the winter, it makes the body much cooler, and it's not good. So you don't do when it's something that it create a cold to the body. Now let's go now to a practical halachot. First halacha is a Rambam, Hilchot Talmud Torah, chapter 3. Torah is not found in one who spends too much of his time on business activity. It is appropriate for one to limit the time he spends on business so he can study Torah. We also learn in Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 398, and we follow the way that the Vilna Gaon explained, that when you have a city and you talk about the corners, this is the zaviyot, the corner of the city. So in the case of a round city, one first square, it's a corner, and then you measure for Shabbat limit. The same rule applied to the city that is a triangular in shape, so they have a irregular parameter. If it's wide in one side and narrow on the other side, you remember we showed in the picture, it's a view through both sides, and the length are of the longer side, and the Shabbat boundaries are measured from there. If it's a long and narrow, a city which is a long and narrow is measured as it, and a Shabbat limit of a square city is measured as it is, without adjusting it so that the sides align with the direction of the compass. Ira asuya kekeshet, if there is a city that's made like a keshet, like a shape like a bow, if there are less than 4,000 cubits between two ends of a city that is shaped like a bow, or a gamma, we explained the gamma is like the reish. The Shabbat boundaries measure from the imaginary bowstring between the two ends of the bow, and there is more than 4,000 cubits between the two ends. The measurement is made from the actual perimeter of the city. Some hold that the measurement begins the place where there are two sides of the bow are separate by less than 4,000 cubits, which is here. Chomat ha'ir shenifretza, if the city the boundary of the city are detached. So if the case of the wall of the city were breached on opposite side and the houses between the breaches were destroyed, if the gap between the two sections of the city is greater than 141 and 1/3 cubits, the two sections are considered distinct entities with regard to halachot of Eruv. If the gap is smaller than that distance, the two sections have the status of a single city, as they stated by Rav Huna, and that's the way the Rama understand. We explain also that if a city shaped like a bow, and if the distance between the imaginary bowstring and the bow is less than 2,000 cubits, the Shabbat limit is measured from the bowstring. Even the two ends are the arc. So you see here in this picture, more than the 4,000 cubits apart. The halacha is according to opinion of Rava, son of Rava bar Ravuna, whose opinion was supported by Abaye. That's the Kesef Mishneh and Vilna Gaon. If you have three petitions that not have roof over them, so structures that contain three walls, even without a roof, encloses the area of 4 by 4 cubits, and it's used as a residence. That's Shulchan Aruch Harav, and it constitutes a house that is considered part of the city from which the Shabbat limit is measured. It's a Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 398. If we have shtei mechitzot vetikra, if there are two walls that are covered by a roof and used as a residence, so Shulchan Aruch Harav said that it's considered a part of the city for the purpose of determining the Shabbat boundaries. This matter was left unresolved by the Gemara, and the general policy is to be lenient in the cases of doubt concerning the halachot of Eruv. Now we also ask what is included in a city. We said bridges, graves, warehouses, stables, idolaters' temples, houses, and other structures used as a residence are all considered part of the city. If any of these structures does not serve as the residence, it is not considered part of the city. That's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 398. A settlement composed of huts, like we mentioned in Africa and other places, that the tent does not have the status of permanent city, so therefore the Shabbat limit of each resident is measured from the entrance of his hut. However, if the residents are permanently settled in a location, so the Magen Avraham hold that it is considering a city, but again, we have to check each case separately. In the present of these three courtyards, each containing two permanent houses, transforming the entire settlement into the city. And that's again Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 398.